Now, when preparing plant-based macaron shells, they can be quite challenging, just like the traditional macarons. But I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks how you can get consistency every time with your vegan macarons. So the first thing, as always, you have to make sure that you mise en place everything. So prepare all of your ingredients before you get started. And I do advise to pick a nice dry day. You essentially want to have a day where it's below 50% humidity. When we work in a kitchen with a high humidity, we can run into some challenges when making plant-based macarons. So do keep that in mind. If it's a rainy day outside, probably not the best time to make your macarons. Now, another thing that I like to do ahead of time is dry out my almond meal. And I will include a video of how I've done that, but essentially all I did was put my almond meal on a baking tray with some paper, and we cook it at a low temperature just to take out any additional moisture. So essentially we're controlling more of the elements within the recipe so we can have more chance of success. I have a big bowl here. I'm going to be adding my confectioner's sugar along with that almond meal that I dried out earlier. I'm going to whisk those ingredients together just to ensure it's nicely dispersed. I'm going to place down a sheet of baking paper here, and I like to sift my almond meal and my confectioner's sugar, and this is going to ensure a nice smooth top to our macaron shells. For that coarser almond meal, you can use like a big metal spoon to pass it through your sieve. Let's give that a good mix again. I'm going to make these two different colors, so I want to divide this into two bowls. Okay, perfect. Now we can get moving on to making our French meringue. So we're using the French meringue method, also known as the cold meringue method. And to replace our egg white, we're using an ingredient called GERBET. Now this is a potato protein blend, which includes potato protein, some xanthan gum, and some plant fiber. So it's going to stabilize our foam and allow us to make a completely egg-free macaron. So I've already gone ahead and weighed out my GERBET. We're going to pop that into our bowl, and it is very important that we start off with a clean bowl. This one did come out of my dishwasher, so I know that there's no fat residue on it. If you're a little unsure, you can wipe your equipment down with a cloth with a little bit of vinegar and then just wipe that out. So GERBET has gone in. I'm going to add about 10% of my sugar, or about a spoon or two. And I'm going to whisk this by hand together just to disperse that powder. Now let's go in with our water. And again, I'm going to mix this by hand with our whisk. And I'm going to do this for about 30 seconds. I just want to start to dissolve that powder and ensure that none of it's getting stuck down the bottom. If you're working with really large quantities, you can use an immersion blender for this step. Let's scrape down the sides and underneath. Now onto our stand mixer, and we're going to mix this on the lowest speed for 2 minutes until that powder is completely hydrated. Hey Google, set timer for 2 minutes. Okay, it's been 2 minutes, let's have a check. We just want to make sure that it's all dissolved, so let's scrape underneath down the bottom. Yep, it's looking good. Let's get it back on our mixer. And now we're going to add 1/3 of our remaining caster sugar. On a medium speed, we're going to beat this until we reach the soft peak stage. So we only want to use the medium speed at this stage because we don't want to incorporate any large air bubbles. So we are at the soft peak stage. Let's take a look at our cold meringue, our French meringue. Oh, probably needs a little bit more, but it is very ribbon-like, so we're almost there. Okay, let's take a look now. Yeah, that's a bit better. So our peaks are just starting to flop over, so we're at that soft peak stage, which means we can slowly start adding our remaining sugar. Let's put this back on a medium speed. And let's add our remaining sugar 1 spoon at a time. I'm going to scrape this down a little bit. At this stage, you can increase the speed slightly. We just don't want to go full speed. And we're going to beat this until we get a nice stiff peak and our sugar is completely dissolved. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, I've got a beautiful thick meringue. Look at that. Nice stiff peaks. Now you want to make sure that that sugar is dissolved. You can just rub a little bit of it between your 2 fingers, and if that is nice and silky smooth, then it is dissolved, so you're ready to go. This one's fine, so we're going to carry on to the next step. Now I will be making 2 colors today, so I need to divide my meringue into 2. So I'm going to first just weigh it and then divide it up. I do find it easier to use the separate bowls as opposed to these taller bowls to mix. It's just a bit easier. Alrighty, now we can start adding our colors. Now because I'm doing a rose, raspberry and lychee, I thought it'd be nice to do a pink and then like a green for the lychee color. Okay, I think I'm happy with those 2 colors. So now we can start folding in our almond meal and confectioner's sugar. So I'm going to add half at a time. And at this stage, we're just folding everything through. We don't want to deflate that meringue. Once it's about half folded, we can add the remaining. Once everything's folded through, we can do what's called our macaronage. So depending on how thick your batter is, will be depending on how much macaronage we need to do. We essentially are trying to create the correct texture for our macaron batter. So to do that, we would need to swipe the batter along the long side of the bowl, just to start deflating it. And we're going to check the consistency. We need to be able to do a figure 8 without it breaking. So for me, I think it's still slightly thick. I'm going to deflate it a little more. You can also go side to side to deflate. Let's have a look at this batter now. I'm going to leave it at this. I actually prefer to have a little bit of a thicker batter than too thin. So I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to do my green now. For our piping bags, I'm going to put half of each color into an individual piping bag without a tip. And I'm doing the full recipe, so this is like the large quantity in your recipe. And when you're filling your piping bag, you want to try not to incorporate too much air. So when you get in the piping bag, see those air pockets? We're just going to flatten those out. Let's cover these with a bit of cling wrap so they don't get a skin on top. Now for our tip, I am using about a 5 to 6 millimeter round tip nozzle. I'm going to put that into our third piping bag. We're going to cut the ends of these other ones as well. Probably about 10 millimeters or around ½ an inch. And we want to place them right at the base of that tip. So I like to pull down that plastic. so we're ready to go. So I have myself a guide here that's going to help me pipe out my vegan macarons. You can make one of these at home as well. You can just use a piece of baking paper and one of these round tip nozzles and just turn it upside down with a marker and then draw out your stencil essentially. And you can reuse this. You just put your sheet of baking paper over the top, adhere it to your bench with a little bit of the batter. I'm actually going to put a little bit more batter just on the top just to help this stick my baking paper. So we just don't want that to move as we're piping. And with our macaron piping, we want to go in at a 90-degree angle with some pressure and a little bit above where our marking is, so hovering over, and we're going to press until we're almost at the end, and then stop, and then we're going to go around. Let's slide it onto our baking sheet. All right, let's quickly do the next one. Now we've got our macarons in our trays. We can give them a tap underneath, bring any of those large air bubbles to the surface. If you notice any air bubbles have come to the surface, you can use a toothpick and just pop those out. Give it a little wiggle. I have some rose petals that I thought would be cute to sprinkle over the top. I thought I might chop them up a little bit so they're a bit smaller. Sprinkle a little bit over the top. Okay, I'm going to set these aside to dry now and pipe out the rest. It is best to take out all of that batter and then refill it just so we don't have any big air pockets. So I'm going to dry these ones as well. Now you can just do this outside until they develop a nice skin on top, or I'm going to do this in my oven. I do have a low setting on there, so I'm going to dehydrate these essentially between 30 to 35 degrees Celsius for about 10 minutes or until they develop a nice skin on top. You can do this in a dehydrator as well to speed up the process. So I have been drying my macaron shells and the tops are nice and dry now. You do want to make sure that they are very dry. You shouldn't be able to squish them or anything like that. They should be very nice and dry to touch. There we go. I'm going to set my oven now to 135 degrees Celsius before we put these guys in to get their feet. So we've got our feet now. Maybe let's have a little bit of a zoom in. We can see them. See those beautiful feet. I've just opened the door a crack. We're just letting a bit of that steam out. And we are going to let these guys cool down for about 5 minutes before we put our oven back on to 100 degrees. So our oven door is open just a crack, 5 minutes, and then we're going to continue baking. Okay, our 5 minutes is up. We are going to get our oven back on and we're going to set it to 100 degrees Celsius. And we're going to set it for 15 minutes. And if you have the option to open the vent, you can open the vent as well. And we want a low fan. Okay, let's continue baking. Okay, let's take a look, see if they are ready. Well, they certainly look great. Let's see if they're coming off the paper. careful. See, they're still sticking. They definitely need some more time. We're gonna pop these in again for about 5 more minutes and then check. Okay, let's check. They're still sticking a bit. Let's do another 5 minutes. Let's take a look. Oh, so they're just sticking a little bit. Let's have a look at the tray down below, because I know that down here is usually a bit hotter. Yeah, see, these ones are coming off. Oh, that one's a little stuck. I think a couple more minutes and then I'll probably take this tray out. Let's go back in. So it's really going to be dependent on the day. If it has been a little bit humid, it could take a little bit longer to bake. Okay, I'm going to take that bottom tray out and get these guys in for a few more minutes. Okay, let's check. I think we tried that one before. Yeah, these ones are. So they're sticking see how this one's sticking just a tiny bit? That's fine. I'm going to take these off. Now I'm just taking my macarons off the tray and I'm just putting it onto a sheet, something that's going to fit into my freezer. And if you pop these into the freezer for about 30 minutes, it just makes them super easy to take off the sheets without damaging the shells at all. So I'm going to pop these into the freezer now, and then yeah, in about 30 minutes you can take them off. You can store them in a container and keep them frozen, or you can start putting your filling in.